Hey all, this is David Ducker coming back at you, and today I'm going to be talking about advanced narrative techniques in role-playing games. Usually, everything runs off first-person perspective for the players. They see the world through the eyes of their characters. It helps them get immersed into that world and into that character. That's awesome. I love it. That's the way I prefer to play the game. As a GM, that's the way I prefer to give out information. However, one of my players, Rick, Big Daddy Rick, is a huge fan of some advanced narrative techniques. He loves incorporating them as a player. He loves when the GM incorporates them. So I'm going to discuss a few of those right now because they're interesting to take a look at, and some of you might find them interesting and enlightening and uplifting in ways that I just don't appreciate. So there are several of these techniques: flashbacks, soliloquies, and aside scenes or cinematic scenes. So let's start with soliloquies. Soliloquies give you a chance to express your character's inner monologue, their inner dialogue, perhaps with themselves even, where you can, have the whole world kind of stop. Your character steps out into center stage and he says what he's thinking inside. Rick loved to employ this as a player, and it's very easy to employ as a player. He would, stop, and he'd be in, let's take an example. He'd be in mid-conversation with Josh's character, Quentin Larimore, and he's telling Quentin about how much he appreciated him and respected him, and how glad he was that he could be on the same team, on the same side as Quentin Larimore. And then he'd stop and he'd turn away and say, but secretly inside, my character has doubts fomenting in the back of his mind, but the conduct of his ally, while he wishes to believe everything he's saying, that hint of doubt remains just behind his eyes. So we'd stop and say something like that. And it was great for getting into that character's head, for fleshing him out, for expositing. This is definitely a case of tell, don't show, which is not... It's a great narrative technique if you're stressed for time. So if you're in a railroad environment or other time-stressed environment, this can be a very good technique to flesh your character out, really pump him up quickly. There are a couple problems that I see with this technique that I don't, which is why I don't use it. First of all, I prefer show, don't tell, and I don't mind taking that time because my games run for a while, for about a year, 300, 400 hours. So I don't mind that. Second of all is the metagaming perspective comes in, because as soon as Rick says that, everyone starts to get suspicious of his character, even though they have no in-character reason to do so. This became a problem with Rick's character. Not that he did anything wrong. He was using this advanced technique, but everyone else was metagaming, and now they're really looking for reasons to turn against him, because they thought he was going to turn against them. So the metagaming can come into play with really with all of these advanced techniques to a degree. And Rick loved to manipulate this so that he would zig them with the metagame one way, so they think he's going to do this for meta reasons, and then he does the exact opposite. In character makes perfect sense. Out of character, he's used metagaming to trick them, which I thought was great, hilarious, and sometimes a very effective technique. So if you can really get into this, you can soliloquy things that aren't necessarily true or that are somewhat misleading. So now that's even advanced for an advanced technique. But I definitely would love to throw it out there and get people's opinions on it. Other advanced techniques would be the aside scene. A great example, again, from Legends of the Seven Sands. Our army is riding in towards Piskia. And as a GM, I set out a scene. I'm like, in the city of Piskia, at the height of the ziggurat, cloaked figures are meeting. And one of them pulls back his hood and reveals a mass of tentacles. And they gibber to themselves in an indecipherable language. And then chuckling is heard as another figure steps out of the circle. Just some aside like that. So kind of a cinematic of another place, another time, something that characters would have no knowledge of, but can enhance the game as a whole. I threw this kind of scene in a couple times, mainly for Rick's benefit, because I know he loves it. I don't like it because I like first-person perspective, but it can be a very valid technique. I've even used this as a player character to do a flashback to set the stage and establish my character using this advanced technique. And I've had some success in doing that. So that's something I've picked up from Rick. It's a tool. It's in my arsenal. Don't always feel the need for it, but it's good to have it there. Again, metagaming issues can come in, but again, like Rick, you can swerve them, and they think that this mass of tentacles is one thing, but it's actually another thing. So you can use it, layer it up. Eventually, it becomes a little convoluted, though. Is the problem. I talk about a writer like Vince Russo, and you know how you can layer two great ideas, use them at the exact same time, and they confuse the entire issue. It's not always a great technique. So don't get overcomplicated. Keep it simple, but keep it good. And the last one is the one that I've had the most success with. That's flashbacks. In this case, it was again one of Rick's characters, Lewin Berengar, who you'll recognize from Return of the Runefangs, those of you who watch those recaps. And what we did with him is in his backstory, as well as his brother's his brother, played by Charles, they had both fought in a war 20 years before the game starts, the War of the Wasteland, and their elder brother was killed during the war. And in present day, there are many rumors about how he died, but none of them were confirmed. So we did a great flashback scene where Rick and Charles played their younger characters. Megan took over an NPC, and Mike was playing as the murdered brother, the elder brother of the two. So we came in, we set the stage there, and came in with all of them together. Megan was playing a priestess, I believe, and they were trying to convince Savage and Lewin were trying to convince Ovi, played by Mike, that they needed to withdraw their armies and their forces. And Mike is staunchly refusing. Ovi Berengar staunchly refused to withdraw. He'd never retreat. He would sooner die. Megan, as the priestess, is trying to also convince him to retreat. So we ran this little scene. Then we jump back into the regular game. No problem. Next session, flashback again, right where we left off. And the flashback. They go outside of the tent, down the hill. Now Savage and Lewin are talking to each other about what has to be done. Someone has to convince him. He'll never be convinced that they need to do something to end this destructive conflict. And great scene where Savage is like, yes. Or actually it was Lewin. Lewin was like, yes, I know what must be done. And he goes back up the hill and he's drawing his dagger and he steps into the tent. And then we cut it. We go back to present day. Next session, we do another aside. Savage is waiting at the foot of the hill. His brother comes back. His dagger's still in his hand. He's got this faraway look in his eyes. Savage asks him, is it done? And Lewin looks at him, he looks down at his unbloodied knife, and he just walks away. Savage has this look like he knows his brother didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done, so Savage draws his dagger and he heads up the hill. End of that flashback. We come back to present day. Next session again. Savage enters the tent, dagger drawn, and he sees his brother there, lying there murdered. Ovi has been murdered. And he looks confused because Lewin's knife was unbloodied when he was coming down the hill. So who really killed Ovi Berengar? And then we left it off there, and that's still where we've got it left off until Rick possibly returns to the game. But great technique that over the course of several sessions, each one of these scenes can lead to a different conclusion. You know, at first it looked like it was obvious that Lewin killed him. Then it was obvious that Savage was going to kill him. And now we've left it off with neither one of them seems to have killed him. So through the flashbacks, we've developed their characters better, and we've developed the history of the world better. Some of these characters who they've only heard about, like Ovi and the character Megan was playing, who does appear later. I don't want to ruin any surprises for when we do this flashback scene again. For those of you who watch the recaps. And the recaps, by the way, don't refer to the player, just the character, because everyone having 2 or 3 names can be vastly confusing. That's why I've done the player character profile video series. You can also check that out in Return of the Rune Fangs in the playlist there. I've done ones for Ulrich, for Camilla, and for Savage. I think just the 3 so far. More to come for Blaine, for Theodore, and perhaps for Lewin as well. So anyways, back to the topic at hand, flashbacks. Great way to develop your world and the characters, and you can still have those little swerves in the metagame that they think it went one way, but it actually went another way. Because what public opinion thinks happened and what actually happened can be vastly different. And you should definitely look at exploiting this for your game. So these are advanced narrative techniques. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them in the comments below. Have you used any of these? Have you used more that I've missed out on? Have you had good success or bad success? Bad success. Have you had failure in these techniques where they detracted from the game? Especially flashbacks can cause continuity issues if you don't keep them on a tight railroad. And I'm sure at some point I'll do a video on time travel, and hopefully I'll remember to mention flashbacks as a form of time travel as well. Because I've done some time travel scenarios with great success, but there are some certain techniques you need to use to make sure your continuity is not destroyed. Unless you want to invite that kind of hyper time, alternate realities style of game. But that's it for today, I think. I'm going to be signing out now. Everybody have a good day in YouTube land.